Alrighty, got our Chapter 7 project, so let's jump right into it. This is the rainfall program. It's right here. It's got a monthly rainfall field. It's an array of doubles. It holds 12 doubles, one for each month of the year. And now we've got our constructor. It takes an array of doubles, and it will read all the values in that array into the monthly rainfall array. And we've got our total rainfall method that calculates the total of rainfall for the year by adding all of them together. We've also got the average rainfall method, which will calculate the average rainfall by calling the total rainfall method and dividing it by the length of the monthly rainfall array, which is 12. And this is rounded to 2 decimal places. We've got our most rain method, and what this does, it'll go through the array, and it'll figure out which month had the most rain, and it'll store the index of that month as well. And then down here, it'll determine which month that was, and it'll return that month's name as a string. And the way that works is it starts out initialized to the first value in the array, which is most rain, and most rain index, and if it can find a value that's greater than most rain, it'll set most rain equal to that, and it'll set the most rain index equal to that element's index. Now the least rain method works exactly the same way, except it's looking for values that are less than least rain. Alright, we've got our main method where we test this, so we declare a scanner here to get keyword input, and we create a rainfall object. And we have our 2 temporary variables for the user input, temp and a. And now we go through and for each of the months of the year, we ask the user for rainfall for the month, and we store that in temp. And if it's less than 0, we tell them it can't be negative, and decrement the loop so it'll ask them for it again. Otherwise, we store it in the month in the A array here. And now we call the rainfall constructor, and pass that value to RF here, and we give it the array of doubles A. And we calculate the total rainfall, the average rainfall, the month with the most rain, and the month with the least rain. Okay, so let's run this, and okay, so month with the most rain was December, the month with the least rain was January, so that looks good. And it works with some crazier stuff too. So so there we go. Now the larger than n method is a lot simpler. We get the scanner here so we can get keyword input, and I believe we did that for this last one as well. Yeah. But anyways, so now we declare the larger than n class, and it has a method here, larger than n. It's a static method, so I don't have to worry about creating a larger than n object just for convenience. And it's got a integer array A and an integer n. And what it does is it will read through that entire array A, and for any value in it that's greater than n, it'll display that value. So what we do here, we test that out, and we declare a new scanner called key to get keyword input. And we have an array of ints that it'll hold 10 ints and an integer n. And then we ask the user for 10 integers. And for each one, we ask them for the integer 1, integer 2, and so on. And we store that in ints. And that can be any value, as long as it's an integer. So it can be positive or negative. Now we ask the user, I'll scroll over to see that, but it says enter the integer that the other integers have to be greater than in order to be displayed. So that's where it asks them for n, and it explains what that does. And then we call the static method larger than n, and we give it the ints array and n. So let's test that with some easy to understand input. So we got like 10, 10, 10, 10, 1, well, that'll work too. And then 5, and the only one it'll display is 10. But this works with other input as well, so like -5, 6, 0, 10, -100, 200, 1,000, 23, 48, 49. Let's say -8. And see, it pretty much displayed all the values that were greater than -8. And that's the larger than n class. Okay, so now we have our gradebook class. This one's kind of complex. We import the scanner here to get keyword input. And we've got we declare a gradebook class here. I put a little note on how this stuff works. Let me minimize some of these so we can kind of see all of this. I think on my work computer I had all that. Yeah, here we go. Anyways, so basically how it works is that each student has an index. So like student 1 is stored at index 0, student 2 is stored at index 1. And that works pretty well for names and letter grades. For test scores, instead of having 5 separate arrays, I've got one 2-dimensional array of doubles. Each student has its own row, so student 0 is row, or student 1 is row 0, student 2 is row 1, and so on. And each student's 4 test scores are stored on their row. Okay, so we've got our names array, our string array called names that holds the students' names, a character array called letter grades that holds the students' letter grades, and a 2-dimensional double array that holds the students' test scores. Alright, now I've got a gradebook method, and it's the constructor for this class, and it takes a string array called m, and a 2-dimensional double array, TS, which stands for test scores. And it will read all the values from n into names, and all the values from TS into test scores. And then it will determine the letter grades by calculating the average test score, and that's a method that's declared below this, and I'll show that. I'll explain that in a second. But right here, it'll go through the entire letter grades array. It calculates the average grade for each student each time it runs. And now we've got, it compares that average grade to the given criteria here. So this is the criteria for an A, a B, a C, a D, and an F. And it will return, well, it won't return it, but it will store the respective character for that letter grade into the letter grades array. And we've got our getName method. It will take the index here of a student and return the name of that index. The average test score, which takes an index here, that's the row index, and it will calculate the student's average test score. It goes through and gets all 4 of those test scores, divides it by 4, multiplies it by 100, and divides it by 100. Well, multiplies it by 100, rounds it, and then divides it by 100. And that rounds it to 2 decimal places. Now we've got our getLetterGrade method, and it takes an index and returns the letter grade at that index. So let's go ahead and test this out. We have our 2 temporary arrays here to hold user input, and that's the temp names array and the temp test scores array. And we have a double here, temp TS, that temporarily holds each test score. And now we create a scanner called keyword input. And we ask the user for the 5 students' names. And we don't have to worry about input validation. This could be anything. So we store each of these names, though, in the temp names array. And then we go through and we ask for each of those students for test scores. And I actually use their name that was given by the user. So then we do this, would be 5 times, because that's the length of temp test scores, so for each of the 5 students. And it'll do this 4 times here to get all 4 test scores. And it will ask for each test score, so test score 1, test score 2, etc. And store that in temp TS. And if that variable there is greater than 0, and greater than or equal to 0, and less than or equal to 100, it will store it in temp test scores. Otherwise, it'll tell the user that they entered a value outside of the given range, or the allowed range, and it'll decrement this loop counter here that way that it'll ask them for it again. Now we've got our gradebook. We create a new gradebook object, and we pass it the temp names array and the temp test scores array as well. And then we calculate, 5 times we calculate each student's average test score and letter grade. I think I talked about the average test score method. Yeah, I did. Couldn't remember if I did that or not. So yeah, that's good. Let's test this out. So A, B, C, D, F. That way we can see this clearly. Whoops. See, there you go. D9, if we said -1, it would also make us do that. And there we go. Calculated their grades. And this will work with some crazier input as well. And I'd pause the video for a second to finish that because it was going to be kind of time consuming. But there we go. That's our input right there, that program. Cool. And that concludes the Chapter 7